Hey, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 7:01 according to my watch. I'm glad you're here. Going to have a good, fascinating, interesting evening with our guest, Gary Habermas, who is Distinguished Professor of Apologetics and Philosophy from Liberty University. He spent a lot of time engaging and researching and speaking on this topic about the Shroud of Turin. And I think you're going to find it quite exciting and fascinating. I really enjoy the approach that he takes, and I think that you will too. This is actually the first time I got to meet him personally, so I've made a new friend. Hopefully, you'll stay behind afterwards, ask some questions, and make a new friend as well. So, as we get started, before he comes up and begins his presentation, I want to have a word of prayer for us, all right? So let's do that. Our great God, Heavenly Father, thank you so much that you love us. You have brought us together this evening, and you have worked wonderfully in Gary's life so that this time is prepared for us to be able to listen and to gain some knowledge and hopefully not just leave it as knowledge in our heads, but to be able to put it into practice, to be able to learn something that we can be better equipped to talk to others about Jesus. People need salvation so much and to be reconciled to you, Lord. And may we be those lights and be able to glean something tonight that will be so beneficial for others. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen. All right, so we welcome Gary Habermas. Go ahead and put your hands together for him. Thank you.
Good. Woo! All right. Hey, Dave, why are you sitting back there? I was going to ask you, how many of these in existence? 5 of them now? There were 7 when you first bought them, right? Okay. This guy's name's Dave Glander. He lives in the Atlanta area. This guy has one of the, I'd say, 5 most unique testimonies you'll ever hear in your life. I got to meet Dave 20 years ago. And I've written a couple books on the Shroud. My co-author was one of the 1978, the scientists in 78 who went to Turin to study the Shroud. And Dave found this online. There's only 5 of them in existence. So he snapped it up real fast after becoming a Christian. And for a while, every time I came to Atlanta, he would find out where I was and bring this thing and display it. So we got together again this time, and that's why this shroud image is up behind you. It's pretty rare to see it in this form, and I mean, it's really accurate, next thing to being the real thing. I'll open up with a brief little shroud story, which will get into my slides, and then we'll try to slides. And we're having Q&A afterwards, right? Okay, Q&A afterwards. In 1975, I finished my PhD dissertation at Michigan State. I know that's a bad name down here, but I just finished it, and I did my dissertation in the history and philosophy of religion in the area of the resurrection of Jesus. Half my committee believed in it, half my committee members, and half my committee members did not believe in the resurrection. But they said, if you can give us good data, they said, how's this line? The head man said, we're liberal around here. He said, but we're good liberal. I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, what's good liberal mean? And he said, we don't have to agree with you. Whatever conclusion you come to, as long as it's well-reasoned, we will pass you. I thought, what? That's fair. I'd call that good liberal. And so after I finished my dissertation, one night I heard that the scientists were getting ready to go to Turin, Italy, to do the investigation on the Shroud. And I called one of the two best known names in shroud research, Eric Jumper, who along with John Jackson were, basically physicists at the Air Force Academy. And Eric referred me to a guy named Ken Stevenson, who was their editor and spokesperson. So I called Ken that first night, found out Ken was a Christian. We start talking. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I did my dissertation on the resurrection." "Why are you interested in the shroud?" "I've been interested in the shroud for years. I read my first book on it when I was in high school, years before." And so he started asking me questions. I said, "Okay, can I ask you some questions?" And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Blah, blah, 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 we're talking about the shroud." I said, "Can I have permission to tape the conversation?" He said, "Sure." So I pushed the recording button and taped. And then partway through the conversation, I said, "What does the shroud have to do with the resurrection of Jesus?" And he said, "Turn off your recorder." I did. He answered my question. I said, "I'm turning it back on, Ken." He said, "Go for it." But we talked for 3 hours, first phone call. And later, "Ken, what does the shroud say about the resurrection?" Second time, "Turn off your recorder." He answered it. "Ken, I'm turning it back on. Go for it." "Ken, what's the shroud got to do with the resurrection?" About 30 minutes later, "Turn off your recorder." 3 times. Turn it back on. So part of this is some things I learned in that very first phone call, but we ended up doing a couple books together. The first one was a bestseller, so it was a good move to get involved with Ken. And what you're going to see here tonight is an example of what he and I discussed. I had been working on a book at that time on the shroud when I called him, and he said, "You're doing a book on the shroud now?" And I said, "Yeah." "This is the first phone call, right? We don't know each other from Adam before the phone rings." He said, "What do you say we do that book together?" I said, "You got it." And we ended up doing the 2 books together. So that's the story of my being connected with Ken Stevenson, who was the editor and spokesperson for the scientific team. He was a professor at the Air Force Academy. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to be doing a lot of this because that's the way we connect to this. Okay, this is the shroud as it appears to the naked eye. Now, when you see what's back here on Dave's, that's what you would have seen if you went to Turin in those days and stayed all day in line and got your cameras out, and this is what you would have seen, because that's a shroud as it appears to the naked eye, which is this. The lighting is different, but we're zeroing in on that. But when you get home in those days, you had to develop your film, right? And when they developed the film, this is what they saw when they get the picture back. Let's go back. Well, I'll tell you what, I got a slide coming back with both of them. That's what you saw with your eye, and when you developed it, this is what the film said you saw. Now, there's a right-left, light-darkness reversal on the shroud photos, so I lined them up on the same side. So it looks like the spear wound here is on the same side, but they're going to be on opposite sides in the photos. And that's the picture with both of them together. Now, if you take the one on the left and you put it this way to the right, that's what you're seeing with Dave's picture tonight. So the one on your left, turn it right, and that's Dave. So how do we know the shroud is why it should be claimed by many people to be the actual burial garment of Jesus? And almost a pretty good percentage of the people who believe it's the actual burial garment of Jesus believe that it's a quasi-photograph of the resurrection. You go, what's a quasi-photograph? Well, the way an X-ray is a photograph. If you break your arm, we often say, "Oh, I had to get my arm photographed." And you go, "Oh, you mean X-rayed?" "Yeah, I had to get a photograph." Okay, well, that's the sense in which this is, and most people who believe it's authentic believe that that's a scorch, laser scorch, actually more than one kind of scorch from the dead body of the person underneath that we'll be talking about here in detail. Okay, next. There's the 2 pictures on your right. the image that appears to the naked eye. Now notice on the left, that's what your photograph says you saw. But notice this one you can see a little bit more accurately. Notice the number 3 shaped blood stain on the right forehead, on the right-hand picture. Look what happens on the left. The number 3 is reversed. And notice the dark spots underneath the eyes of the man in the shroud. The part of his beard right here is light over on the left side. More about this later, but it looks like he's got a fairly modern beard, short and a double pronged. That's not true. The beard is long, more like Dave's, and it goes longer. But you'll be able to see that in a photograph a little bit later. Okay, next. This is a drawing, a painting of the shroud from 16th century, and that is the way the man in the shroud was laid, with the shroud going lengthwise around his body. It's 14 feet 3 inches long, 3 feet 7 inches wide. He's got his hands crossed in front of him. So that's a really good and interesting photo. More about this later. But the man in the shroud, one of the evidences he's dead is that his body's in a state of rigor mortis. And like I say to people, it's kind of hard to fake rigor mortis. But they tried to show you how it's faked in this photograph. It's not accurate, but in order to get his head moving forward, they put it on this man's knee. The guy to the left, probably Joseph or Nicodemus in the painting, but they've got the head on the man in the shroud on his leg, because you have to explain why the head is like this on the cloth. So he says, oh, it was leaning on his leg, and the researchers go, now that's rigor mortis, his head is frozen forward. The left foot, let's see, is it here? The left foot is turned toward the right foot like this, rigor mortis. And more about this later, but it's because one nail was placed, they think, but the nail was like this. When they took the nail out, it separated, but the foot still bent over. So these are signs that the man in the shroud is dead, but more about that later. Okay, next. All right. There have been, Ken and I were getting ready to write a second book, let's put it that way. And the book was due to come out in 1990, which it did. And it's called The Shroud and the Controversy. But before the book came out in 1988, I was in Oxford lecturing at Oxford University. And one morning my student said to me, hey, did you hear the shroud's a fake? I went, what? Because all the data are so pro-positive. They said, yeah, it's fake. Well, that day we were going on a day trip into London. We're going to take Britrail across the country over to Wales. And so when we got downtown in London, the folks in the station had large piles of newspapers that day because they knew they were going to sell a lot. And on the cover, the shroud is medieval. And they had piles of them. They probably sold them all. I thought, how can this thing be? And so the story went around in 1988 that the shroud was carbon dated at 3 universities in Arizona, at Oxford University, and in Switzerland to the mid to late Middle Ages. It was just a big shock to everybody, and it took a long time for that to sink in to everybody. That was 1988. You can see the date of this, 2005. The chief chemist on the team was Ray Rogers, you military people, of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, University of California. He was a chemist. He was the chief chemist on the team. And he published this article in the journal Thermochemica Acta, a secular, peer-reviewed chemical journal. And he argued, he starts out, a lot of people think that when people argued pro-shroud, they had to be Christians. Well, Ray, good guy, nice guy, but Ray starts his article like this. I don't want to hear any baloney about miracles and resurrections and things like that. I don't care about those subjects, so let's not talk about them. He starts his article like that. And then he goes, let me tell you why the 1988 carbon-14 was incorrect. He says, I'm a chemist. I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm giving you empirical information. He said, I have a couple threads, actual threads from the shroud. And he said, I compared two of the threads. And he says, and he gave a list of these things in this article. And he said, they're not the same cloth because they do different things chemically. They react chemically differently to different tests. Very, very simply, the two pieces of the shroud are not from the same cloth. Something else is going on. So he developed his thesis, and let's move through it just real quickly. Here's the abstract of the thesis. In 1988, the date they came up with was 1260 to 1390, and they argued they had 95% accuracy, confidence, that the shroud was those dates. And that prompted questions about the validity of the sample, because preliminary estimates indicate a much older date for the cloth than the radiocarbon analyses. And in red is his précis that he's going to argue in this journal article. Observations prove that the radioactive sample was not part of the original cloth. What they dated was not part of the original cloth, and we'll show you what it was in a minute. It's not part of the original cloth of the Shroud of Turin. The radiocarbon date was thus not valid for determining the date of the shroud. Okay, you know, it's better looking at Dave's here. The shroud was caught in a fire. It's been caught in a couple fires, most lately just about less than 30 years ago. It's caught in a fire. And if you see the dark spots, those are burn marks. Some well-meaning nuns came and made patches, and that's the patches. See the light-colored patches? They tried to cover up these burns, tried to do a good job. But some of the scientists, by the way, have pointed out if you fold the cloth up, there's reason to think it used to be displayed in the Middle Ages before this dating as a face only. If you open it up, it's like paper dolls. Notice the marks are very similar across from each other. That's an argument for the folding. But anyway, he said, I don't care what your religion is. I don't care about the religious question. Don't tell me about miracles. I don't go for that stuff. He said, well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm giving you a chemical response. This thread is not this thread. I'm just telling you, chemically, they're different. And so what he said was they dated some of the, not necessarily patches, but there's different kinds of material taken off the shroud to date it. Now, let me give you an example from today. Your son goes to a ball game. He's small, and he comes home. You go to church, let's say church, and he's coming home, and mom says, don't go play baseball until you change your church clothes. He forgot one day, and he wouldn't play baseball, and he slid into second base, and he got a little tear on his knee. Mom has a choice. You iron on a patch, the big ones, you iron on a patch, or you try to match the thread to the pants, and you try to sew it, because if you can't sew it, your church pants become play pants, and you have to go buy new church pants. Okay, you know how that goes? And there's more than just the patches done on the shroud. There's little, what they call invisible weave. And Ray is saying they've got something here, but he said, I don't know what's going, I can't disprove this, so to speak, but I will tell you this. This A is not B. They are just not the same chemically. You can't argue with this because I've got the microscope and you can see the characteristics, the chemical characteristics are way different. Okay, so let me give you a few arguments why the 88 carbon-14 was mistaken. For the longest time, there's so many pro-shroud arguments that the date just surprised everybody. But here's a few things to think about. One is Ray Rogers' argument, and that impressed a lot of people. Let's go to the next one. This was published, you can see, just recently, well, six years ago, in the Oxford Journal Archaeometry. And Tristan Casabianca, a good guy, in fact, he came to our university and gave a lecture on this shortly afterwards. He was a non-Christian who became a Christian by studying the Shroud of Turin. And he put a team together because he had some inklings that the main problem with the shroud was not that the two threads are chemically different, although they are. He got a team together with himself, a textile expert, and two PhDs in statistics, how you do statistics. And they put in a Freedom of Information Act. You know how things are today? You put something with the government, you don't get a response for a long time, right? They put in the Freedom of Information Act, and they required the dates that were arrived at from Arizona, Oxford, Switzerland, and they didn't get the results back for 2 years. And when the dates came back, guess what they found out? The date that was arrived at was manufactured, and the dates for the shroud, the 3 laboratories, were all over the place. So what did they do? They were good scientists, but they weren't good statisticians. One report was they averaged the years. You don't average when you're doing statistics. So Tristan published this in this. I have to get this right. Seems like the editor of Archaeometry at that time was the same guy who published some of the results that said 1988. So it's a pretty fair, the guy's given the other side here. And here's what Tristan's conclusion is. I can't tell you what the date on the shroud is. I can tell you what the date on the shroud is not. It is not the dates that they arrived at in 1988. So that's Tristan's argument. All right. Let me give you another argument next. This is from art history. Okay, a couple arguments here. You can take paintings from the shroud and, well, okay, I misspoke myself. We assume the paintings were from the shroud because a lot of the pictures of Jesus here look like the man in the shroud. Let me give you a few examples. The man on the right, remember from earlier? It looks like he's got a split in his beard, and the beard is off center. If you go right down the middle of the face, the parting of the beard is on the right side. Okay, keep that in mind. The hair on the right is behind the shoulder. The hair on the left, the hair on the left is behind. You can see it there. There is you'd have to be up there close to see it, but between the eyes, there's a triangular shaped mark. What's a triangle doing between the eyes? But there's a triangle shape there. The guy in the painting has a triangle shape between his eyes. He's got the hair out the same way. He's got now this is the first time you've seen it. You'll see it more clearly later. Notice he's got a line across the neck underneath the beard. You see that? Underneath the beard on the right. Why is this line going across the neck? Because there's a line on the shroud, and if that's Jesus's, assumed, if that's Jesus, we got to put a line there. He puts a line there. Now, let me tell you something. The beard goes down to the line, like I said, like Dave's. The beard comes down here, but it looks like it's short. That's because this little guy here, and the opening off center, is a blood stain, and the hair. But they thought it was part of the beard, so he's got like a modern beard, but his beard is long, and you're going to be able to see this in detail later. But notice on the bottom, on the shroud, notice the 2 lines at the bottom of the beard on the left side. Not the big dark one, but that's a real wrinkle. You'll be able to see the blood flows along that ancient wrinkle. On the bottom, looks like 2 lines. He's got a big one there. Let's keep going. This is maybe the oldest artistic picture of Jesus. It's not a painting, But this goes back to the 6th century AD. Now, it doesn't have all the marks. It's a little light here in the picture, but there's a triangle between the eyes. The hair is in the back, out here, differently on the right. It's a short beard, although it doesn't have the cleft in the middle. Short beard, but notice, well, there's a line on the shroud. If this is Jesus, I got to put a line there. Puts a line across the throat. Why so many things that are similar? The eyes are very large. The nose is abnormally long and slender because, the reasoning is, because in the shroud it looks like that. But this is 6th century. All right, tell me something. If this is copied off the shroud in the 6th century AD, how can the shroud be dated to 1288? So this is an art argument, an artistic argument that says the shroud was around a long time before the 13th century AD. All right, next. This is one of my favorites. Let's go 3 pictures here. The one at the bottom is the shroud picture. It's made to look a gold color. Why? Because this is a Roman gold coin. And in the middle is the shroud and the gold coin put together. So you can see how similar they are. The scientist who put these two together passed away a few years ago because he was a dual specialization medical doctor at Duke Medical School. And let's just look at the coin. This is a little tiny gold coin. The fellow who had these photos, he found these and bought them. You can imagine how special that is. A little Roman gold coin, and they come in different denominations, like nickels and dimes and pennies. They come in different denominations. But look at the Roman coin. Notice the cross. He's alive here, but notice the idea of the cross behind him. Notice the beard. It's open in the middle. I'm going to the upper left-hand corner. Notice the beard is open in the middle. It makes the beard look short. What in the world are the 2 lines there underneath the chin? Because the 2 lines are in the shroud picture. Why is there a triangle between the eyes? Because there's a triangle between the eyes and the shroud, and that's the overlay. And the guy who did this said there's over 200 points of similarity between that coin and the shroud at the bottom. When you put them together, you can see the points. And also, the hair is away from the face. Another question, what that is. But the hair is away from the face. A lot of people believe that that's the burial cloth. It's only described 2 places in the New Testament, John 11, John 20. John 11 is Lazarus, John 20 is Jesus. They said they took a face cloth, and a lot of people say, well, then that can't be the shroud face, because if they put a face cloth like this, hold up. The Greek word just means handkerchief. Yeah, they could have put it this way, but not what the Greek says. The Greek says in Lazarus' case and Jesus' case, they rolled it up and put it, one says put it around his face, one says they put it around his head. And the hair comes out. You'll be able to see it in I've been seeing this a lot, but you'll be able to see it in a 3D photo later. This comes out and sticks, and something is in between the 2. But it's in the picture in the shroud, and there's it's a very small separation, but up in the coin, you'll be able to see that. Okay, next. Now, before we get here, so this is 3 arguments I've given against the 1988 argument. Number 1, Ray Rogers, the 2 claws are not the same chemically. Number 2, they screwed up the dating by averaging. And number 3, art history said that the shroud is way early. Can I go back one picture? I forgot to tell you one thing there. There's a number of these coins, like I said, I described as Roman nickels and dimes. These come all the way from 690 AD up till about 715 AD. How can you have coins that look like Jesus' face from 690 to 715, but the scientists say that the shroud was 1288? Doesn't work. Why the earlier picture from the 6th century? Doesn't work. So these Roman coins are very helpful. Some of them are smaller or larger, just like nickels and dimes. Okay, next. There's some controversy about this one among the scientists. Using the 1931 photographs on the shroud, they're called the Inrier photographs. The camera is going to zero in here on the right eye of the man in the shroud. And let's see what they saw. Next. This is a, well, on the left, that's a staff. And it's a Greek lettering. On the right, this is what we might call the widow's mite. And there are different things, I have a replica in my office and it looks different still. It's got a staff and it's got a different one on the right. But let's take a look at the Inrier photograph from 1931 on the right eye of the man in the shroud. Next. There's the staff. And look at the image on the right. It looks like U in English, U-C-A-I. There's other Greek letters on the end. Some people say they're up to 7 letters now in Greek. And you know what if that's what that is, U-C-A-I, you know what that is? It's Tiberius Caesar's name. And Tiberius was on the throne when Jesus died, and he died, depending on when you date the birth of Jesus, either death, either 30 or 33. He died in 37. But this is a lepton of Pontius Pilate, minted between 29 and 32 AD. Adds to the mystery. Okay, next. As again, not all scientists, they don't like the fact that it's in the 1931 photos, but not in the 1978 photos, not as clear. This is a picture of John Jackson. I told you I talked to one of the 2 guys best known for the shroud work. Here's the other guy, John Jackson, professor of physics. He's retired now, but he went from Air Force Academy to Colorado State University. He's sitting on the stool there in the middle, and these are the men and women who are getting ready to test the shroud behind John, not unlike Dave's setup here. That's the table on which they're going to put the shroud for testing. They took thousands of photos, and let's see a few of them. Next. Now, the guy I talked to on the phone was Eric Jumper, the guy in the foreground and the green shirt. The guy on the left is one of the scientific photographers in the team. He was a professor at the Brooks Institute of Photography in Pasadena. I don't have any idea, it's not my area, but Brooks was called the 2nd best photographic college in the US. John Jackson, the guy in the stool, is looking over Eric's shoulder. The fellow on the right in the white is an Italian scientist. They're doing something here for the first time. They are taking the backing off the shroud. Now, the nuns who did some of the patches put a backing on the shroud, and they wanted to ask this question: is the image on the back of the shroud or not? And notice there, look at John's attention. They want to know what's going on, and we'll show you just coming right up. Let me first show you a couple more photographs of this is Sam Palacore. I'm a guy from the 60s, right? I'm a real old guy. You know how he's a physicist from the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. You know how you can tell he's a hippie? You recognize those shirts? Some of you may have owned these. That's a Flower Power shirt from the 60s. And he's looking at the face of the man in the shroud. You say, how do you know? Because you can see the man's hands crossed down here. So that's your point of reference. And he's up in the face area, and he's doing electron microscopic work on the face. Okay, next. Kodak made sticky tape samples specifically to lift things off the cloth. This fellow's taking samples off of the feet. And let me tell you ahead of time what they found. There's dirt and blood on the bottom of the feet. Not surprisingly, because the man walked barefooted to his death, and he had blood on the bottom of his feet. Here's what's interesting. The dirt is a special kind of dirt that is found almost exclusively in the Jerusalem area. It is a type of limestone, and this material was so exact that it was written up in a secular chemical journal telling what species of limestone this is, tying it, supposedly, according to typical arguments, to Jerusalem. You go, well, maybe someone took it to Jerusalem. Why? Maybe they ordered the cloth from Jerusalem. Why? Nobody then could tell that the cloth came from Jerusalem, so why go to all that kind of trouble? You think they're going to be able to do a scientific test on the dirt? Or blood type it? Because they have blood typed this. But he's taken those samples off that later became that Jerusalem limestone. Okay, next. This looks like ultraviolet, right? I'm sorry, this looks like infrared. It's actually ultraviolet photos. And this is, I put this up there because it's an example of what that could be Dave's picture right there, and this cameras are set up to take, and they would take thousands of photos. They had control of this for a week. Next. More pictures. Next. All right, the next two photos are not normal coloration on the shroud. And these two photos, everything the same density as blood shows up red. So you can see the blood on the face, and you can see a little bit more carefully here for one of the first times. The beard goes down to the blood at the bottom. It's a long beard, not a short beard. The reason it looks like a short beard is there's a line there that keeps the blood from running further. It's an ancient wrinkle. How do you know? It's ancient blood. An ancient wrinkle. This man looks like a prize fighter. He's often compared to a boxer or a mixed martial arts guy. His one eye is swollen, especially so, and the other one less so. His eyes, we already said, he could have coins over his eyes, but there's even blood in the eyebrows, blood in the goatee, blood across the mustache. It has been thought, I've never seen validation for or against, but it's been thought by some that one of the blows to his face ripped his lip up to his nose, and you say, and his nose appears to be broken. You go, oh, that's a sin, because not a bone would be broken with Jesus. You're forgetting something. The lower nose is cartilage, it's not a bone. And it's the lower nose that's right in here that looks like it's twisted. Hard to tell if it's broken, but it may be, and it's not a bone. We say the bone, but it's not a bone. We say a guy broke his nose in a fight. They mean tore the cartilage. Okay, next. Also not the same color. This is all the squiggly marks are whipping marks. You see the face, the chest, the arms are crossed. Now, you cannot see you can't see the wound on the right wrist. The left hand is over it like this, but you can tell there were nails in both places because you can see on the left, there's a hole right here, and it goes up the arm, and the blood goes up the arm on the right, but you can't see the hole right here. And you go, well, that doesn't seem to match because the Bible said Jesus showed them his hands and his feet. Well, first of all, we didn't say this had to be Jesus. But secondly, that's not a good comeback because in the Greek, the Greek word there, and I was told this by a national Greek, a Greek citizen who told me that the word hand is a general term that could mean all the way up, further up. In fact, it's been used one time to be in the upper arm. So it's not an exact word, and almost all medical doctors and New Testament scholars now, is that fair, Mike? Believe the nail was placed in the wrist? Almost unanimously. Right here, and you can see where the wound is. Okay, next. If Ken Stevenson, my co-author, were here, there's a bunch of these, he would tell you this is his favorite shroud photograph. This is called a photomicrograph. Everything, okay, the red spots are blood. See the silver in the middle? The silver going down the middle? That's an image thread. Looks shiny? That's an image thread. The spots are blood. And remember I told you the picture? I said tell you later how they separated the cloth from the back? The blood goes through the cloth. That's like, duh. Blood will go through a piece of linen, which this is. It's a 3-to-1 linen weave, and blood goes back, but the image does not. And if you take a thread, Larry Schwalbe recently passed away, but he's a physicist from the from Los Alamos, a physicist who did a forward for us on our first book. Larry said that if you take a thread and put it in just a thread, it's made up of up to 200 fibrils. Well, if that's true, the image is on the top one, maybe 2 fibrils. There's no image halfway through the thread. There's no image on the back of the thread. The blood is on the back. The image is not. Now that's going to be a secret, because whatever created the image on the shroud is what's called superficial. Superficial means it's on the surface only, and no matter what thing you're trying to put on the shroud, paint, dye, powder, whatever foreign substance you want to put on the shroud to fake the shroud, it's not going to stay on the first 200th of a thread. You're going to find it going through the cloth. You'll get it on the back if it's on an object. If you use powder, the powder will be through the cloth. But this is superficial. And Ken would stun people in his early pictures, and I started doing this, and people started going, like that, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. But what I did was I said, if this is Jesus, you're looking at his blood. Now, I don't know it's Jesus. I don't know that. But, you know, the blood of Jesus is pretty sacred to Christians. And this is a close-up, a photomicrograph of a blood stain. Next. This starts, we used to say the number 1 enigma on the shroud, but now I'd say it's number 2. This is a 3D photo. They used to put photographs of the shroud in the VP8 image analyzer. It was a machine they used then for analyzing photographs for cloth, the body. It would be used for from bodies in space to tell difference. But when they put it in the computer, the picture came out looking like a human face. But if you put faked shroud photos in there, it's goofy. The eyes sink way in, the nose sticks way out, everything is off. But the shroud photos are accurate 3D photos. And nobody could explain that. And that was often said to be the number 1 issue with the shroud. By the way, see where the beard is? The beard is way down on the bottom, not the short one, which is framed by the bloodstains. Okay, next. I don't know why this green photo, this photo is about as common as a photo you see. The shroud's not this color, but this color just often comes out. They were testing for something, and just a very common photo of 3D, but I put it in there because it's 3D. Next. When I first went to Ken's house, I went into his front door, turned left to go into his living room, and this is a 6-foot tall, looks like a mummy case. It's not an object, maybe, it's not a piece of art. This is the VP8 image readout done on cardboard. So, and by the way, notice the hair on the side? See, it's away from the face? The right side's the same one. Notice the right eye puffed out here. Notice the line, the beard right across here. But this is a 3D photo, which we don't get in normal photographs. So we used to say this was number 1, the hardest thing to explain, until just recently. And we're almost done here, but we'll go to the biggest enigma. Next. This is a Roman flagrum. Let's go right ahead and go to the next one. They've actually found one of these in, Mike, is Pompeii the city and Pompey is the guy? Is that the way it goes? So this is Pompeii. This is a Roman flagrum was found in remember the city that was covered by Mount Vesuvius? That's a drawing on the right. That's not the flagrum. But on the left is a close-up of the wounds on the back. It's like a dumbbell-shaped piece of lead. Next. These are close-ups of the actual wounds. The left is a close-up of the back. The right is from the back of the head down to the calves. You ever watch detective movies and they can tell you better not kill somebody today because they can find you no matter who you are. They can trace a fingernail to your house, you know. I mean, it's crazy. Well, they looked at this and they said there were at least 2 Roman soldiers, whoever they were, did the whipping. And one of them was significantly taller than the other one, and one of them was left-handed. Isn't that interesting? Because of the angle of the wounds. And also, they whipped him on virtually every inch of his body except his face, his lower arms, and his feet. Everything else has been whipped. And look in the right-hand picture. The calves are whipped. You see it? And the calves come from angles. That's the height and left-handedness, right-handedness of the people doing the whipping. Now, what's that line that goes across the waist? The spear wound right here in the chest, which you'll see in a second. The spear wound that goes here, the blood flows down and the blood flows horizontally. So when they laid the body down, the blood flowed across. Now, in case you've heard somebody, usually one of these skeptics, so they know everything, they haven't studied anything, but they know everything, and they tell you, he's not dead because dead men don't bleed. Okay. On the Shroud team, there are a number of pathologists who study dead bodies for a living, like Bob Buckland, who's a top pathologist, coroner, LA County. And he says, dead bodies bleed. He said, if you don't believe me, please visit me in the morgue, and I'll take you around and show some bodies that even now bleed weeks after they've been, he said that's just a joke to say. I mean, by and large, they don't bleed all over the place, but blood comes out of dead bodies. So that doesn't mean he's alive. That's a joke. Okay, next. These are authors' drawings, left foot over the right foot. I already explained that. The foot is in a state of rigor mortis, so it's separate. Where the nails are placed. A nail here in the palm would not hold the weight of an adult male, but it will down here if lodged in between the wrist bone. And we can know the Roman soldiers knew where to put the nails. They had enough probably tearing off the hand kind of accidents. Okay, next. This is a close-up again, left hand over the right. By the way, that's a good picture of the right hand. You can't see the wound, but you can see the blood flowing up. Next. A drawing of where the spear went in between the fifth and the sixth ribs, into the heart, through the lung, into the heart. Good evidence that this guy's dead, right? They speared the lung and the heart. Next. This is the right with a nice patch there. This is the right side of the chest. This is the spear wound. Next. Now, these are the photographs that have replaced 3D as being the hardest thing to explain on the Shroud. I told you a guy on the team was a double medical specialty at Duke Medical School. And so he took a skeleton here and he got some photos and he superimposed it over the Shroud. And a lot of the critics would say, these fingers look in the, not in the white skeleton, but look here. They say, these fingers look abnormally long. That looks like it's a fake or something, because no fingers go like that. What are they looking at? They're looking at they're looking at the skeletal structure in the hand where the bones go all the way back to the wrist. So it makes the fingers look really long, but it is, you know why? Because this is where you get the belief that it's an X-ray and it's coming out from the X-ray. Now, if the bones in the hand weren't clear enough, let's go to the next one. This is the picture in the face. Next. This is the one I wanted you to see. This is the doctor from Duke. That's his face on the right in the X-ray. This is funny because the guy forgot to take his glasses off before he did the X-ray. But what he did was he took the skull X-ray, he set it up against the Shroud face, and look how the teeth line up. Exactly. Right across, the teeth look accurate across, up and down. Next. This is the face of the man of the Shroud. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Look at the picture on the left-hand side. Look at the lip, look at the mustache, the lip, and look under the lip. Can you see it from where you're sitting? Underneath the lip, do you see the little tiny spots under his lip? Those are thought to be teeth. That's not because somebody whipped him and tore his skin and you could see the roots of his teeth. He wasn't hit there. But underneath, these little tiny spots look like teeth. And if you come up and look, Dave, I don't know if they're visible in your picture or not, but there's not only teeth there, there's roots. The roots of the teeth underneath. And this is to become the one to explain, because 3D is like impossible to explain. But why are teeth showing up on the image that had nothing to do with the beating? Because we used to see, early in our lectures, we used to say, somebody would say, well, if this is an x-ray, is the light coming down or out? And we'd say, we don't know yet. And then a little bit later, they discovered these teeth, and we said, and I was doing this a couple times, I had a doctor in the front row. He goes, ho, 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 I've done enough x-rays all my life, let me show you something. Those are teeth. And he said, the x-rays are coming from the inside out. How do you know? Because they carried the teeth image out onto the skin on top. So the power, that it's out inside out, and you get the teeth. The teeth seem, right now, it's very hard to explain. And there's been a lot of experiments from different directions, different kinds, that have argued that what you're looking at right now is two different kinds of scorches. Two different kinds of scorches, and a chemist, he's passed away now, but a chemist at Eastern Michigan University who first discovered the teeth and all this, he said, how do we get this picture? He said, they're x-rays. He was an x-ray specialist. He said, these are x-rays. He said, how do you get x-rays in that day? He goes, I don't know. These are he actually said this in an article. Maybe the guy lived in a radioactive cave. And then he said, but that wouldn't work, because if he was this much elucidated, he'd be dead a long time ago, if it's that much radiation. He said, maybe he ate, you can get lettuce sometimes in the ground that's irradiated. He said, same thing. If it's enough to make the image, it's enough to kill him. That's not it. He goes, but they're the only two questions I can come up with. He said, because if I say anything else, I'm going to start getting religious, and I'm not religious, I'm a chemist. And he left it there. But he's the one that did the teeth here. I think I've got one more slide. Is there one left there? Is that the end? Okay. Depends. I have a whole bunch of sets of slides on my computer, and one of them has the dark one on the left at the end for you to look at the picture for the last time. Okay. That's the end. Comments, questions, derogatory remarks? Yes, sir. You have to speak really loud. Seriously, I'm about 75% deaf, and that's not death, but deaf. Thanks.
What do you say to people who say the blood is moving in the wrong direction?
Why did what?
The blood.
Why is it? No, I heard you. Why is that the wrong direction?
Some people make the argument that the blood is pooling or moving down the arms or across the face in the wrong direction.
This way, because this guy was a crucifixion victim. Even if he's not Jesus, he's a crucifixion victim. So the blood's going this way. I mean, it's up, but it's down, if you know what I mean. It's up the arm, but it's down if you're like this. Yes? Oh, you're the mic man. Okay. Another question? Dave, who owns this big thing?
Why is the blood still red?
Oh, your voice is probably just fine.
Why is the blood still red?
All right, Dave, you got to use the mic.
Why is the blood still red? If it was actual blood, shouldn't it be black?
Do you think it's red in your picture?
That's red. It's rusty red.
Boy, the photos I've seen, it looks brown. But Why is it red? Boy, I've heard this question 100 times, and honestly, there's a really good answer. And right now, this is a sign that I'm too old to be up here. I'm trying to remember the answer. Pardon? Billy Rubin. Did you know that? Yeah. Oh. Oh, you were setting me up. Well, see, I'm old, and I need help. Tell me again, you've got a certificate in Shroud Studies from what school in Rome? APRA. In Rome. So he's got a certificate in Shroud Studies. We need people like that around. Mike's a New Testament scholar. That's why I've called him several times, because he's a big help on the Greek words. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll remember. I'll say, oh, yeah, that's the one where Dave Gladder set me up and you straightened me out, and it's Billy Rubin. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
In your initial conversation with the guy that you called, and he said turn the
With
recording
Ken Stevenson?
off, yes, are you allowed to say what he said during that time?
Thank you for asking that.
Did he do what? I didn't.
When he told you to stop recording 3 times.
Oh, what did he say?
What did he say?
Yeah, I've done this several times, and I'm not asked that often. What he said when he said turn off the recorder is that he gave me several arguments for the shroud being caused by the resurrection of Jesus. And at that time, they didn't know the teeth. So he said you've got superficiality, you've got, oh, I didn't even tell you this one, non-directionality. Now, non-directionality, our second book has a photo of it, but all it looks like is you take a lampshade off of a bulb and photograph it. Non-directionality looks like this. It's like a bulb without a shade. Whatever the image on the shroud is, all right, if you're faking the shroud, you go like this. You use a crayon, you use paint, you use chalk, and you go like this. I'm left-handed. You get tired. That's directionality. There's no directionality on the shroud. Whatever happened was there. So the first hardest thing to explain was often said to be the superficiality, top few fibers of every thread, non-directionality. 3D was the hardest to explain, and now I think the teeth has probably surpassed that as an evidence that the shroud image is a scorch. Back in the back. Sorry?
He didn't want you to record it for what reason?
Record the what?
He didn't want you to record it. Why?
Record what?
That answer that he gave. When he told you to stop recording. Why did he?
Oh, Ken, because he wasn't allowed to speak of it. He could speak of it, but he couldn't be recorded. They had to sign a half-page legal run-on sentence that said we won't talk to anybody about anything, but the stuff that he talked about was stuff that was already in the news, and it was out there. But the scientists didn't allow anything to be published that wasn't out because their view is it had to come out in a journal article before it comes out in the newspaper. I ended up being Ken's associate. I had to sign one of those long run-on sentences myself. So, legalese. But he couldn't talk about the things when the tape recorder was turned off. Yes?
Does the blood lend itself to DNA analysis?
Somebody help me.
Does the blood lend itself to DNA analysis?
Oh, yeah. The DNA is what?
The DNA is too degraded to do any analysis of the blood.
Well, we did have one of the pathologists tell us in a 1978 investigation that's AB. AB negative or just AB? Anyway, so possibility, too degraded, we don't really know the DNA. By the way, for anybody to say, wow, that was a close one, I'm glad we don't have the DNA of Jesus, because somebody could be some freak and that would be the next superhero movie. And you can't kill Jesus, so now what are you going to do? Okay, the joke is this. All the pathologists at this last meeting I was at, World Meeting of the Shroud, last time I was there, all the pathologists said this. We got we got at least that time, we got the DNA, but I'll tell you what it isn't. It's not Jesus. Because DNA is so destructible that if you touch anything, all the hands will be in the DNA. So you got a measurement of the DNA of the tens of thousands of people who've touched the shroud since it was around from the beginning. So what it isn't is the man buried in the shroud, whoever he is. So we're safe. We don't know what the DNA of Jesus was, and we don't know what his blood type was, for sure. Yes. I can hear this one.
Okay.
I hope.
I'm not really sure if this is an intelligent question or not, but if indeed this is the image of Christ,
If it is.
what does it tell us about the process of the resurrection?
Okay, good question. Did y'all hear that? If it could be the image of the resurrection of Jesus, what do we learn about the resurrection from the cloth? I think one of the first things Mike and I have published at length, including co-published on the resurrection, we both published hundreds of pages on this. First thing would show you is that what happened to Jesus happened to his body. I think that would be a real key, that the resurrection of Jesus wasn't a wispy ghost it wasn't, what did you call it, Mike, in the book? You called it Casper or? Casper, this is fantastic. He called it, is Jesus' appearances, are they Casper, Casper the friendly ghost? Casper or corporeal, bodily? And the shroud would tell you it's corporeal, it's not Casper. And we have a lot of stories in parapsychological literature, occultic literature, serious literature, of where people they think they see. You've probably heard things about spouses. Now, my wife died in 1995 of cancer. This happens to a lot of people, and in some studies, anywhere from 25 to 75% of people who lose a spouse, the spouse appears to them for like 5 seconds or less, as a general rule, very brief. Now, sometimes there are people in the room, and they see the person, but they're always Casper appearances. They're disembodied appearances. But what we learn from the shroud, if this is Jesus's, that are bodily appearances. And we know that from the New Testament, because Paul's quoting a very early creed from the 30s, and Paul says, 1 Corinthians 15:3, Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and was buried, and rose and appeared. So the argument goes, dead, buried, rose, appeared. That means what went down is what came out. And if what went down is what came out, it's bodily. And one more example, Philippians chapter 3, the chapter, Mike's got a whole bunch of them. Romans 8:11 is another one. But Philippians 3, the chapter ends like this. Someday, for the believer, someday our vile bodies will be made like unto his glorious bodies. The Greek word is soma. And if Jesus had appeared like Casper, Paul would have said, very easy switch in the Greek, our vile soma will be like his glorious pneuma, spirit. Paul didn't say that. Our vile body will be like unto his glorious soma. So it's taught clearly in Scripture. The very Greek words, anastasis, egero, the very words mean what happened to the body. What comes down is what came out. I think the shroud is a great, if it's authentic, it's an additional argument that it happened to Jesus' body, and a further application, that's what happens to the believer's body. We don't become Casper. Now, the intermediate state is between death and the second coming of Jesus. In the intermediate state, people believe, 2 Corinthians 5 and other passages, we are Casper. We are bodiless until the Lord comes, but then we are re-embodied when Jesus comes. So we can spend some time, who knows, disembodied, believers. But Paul still says it's far better than it is now. But then he clearly says, 1 Thessalonians, Christ will bring us. It's an odd phrase. He brings our bodies back. We get a body back. So the Casper will be reclothed.
But if a physicist believer
Yep.
tried to take the evidence from this, what would he say about the actual process of?
Well, I'm telling you, dozens of physicists have studied these laser technicians from all around the world. They're not unanimous, but by far, they can be wrong, but by far the leading view is 1 to 2 kinds of radiation cause the image on the shroud. It's radiation from a dead body, a dead and crucified body.
So it came from the body itself and not from an external?
No, it's not the external, because like the guy from Eastern Michigan said, if it came from the cave or the lettuce, he'd have been long dead before this happened. Okay, got several more. I'll tell you what, let me take these and then I'll call a quiz, because some of you want to go home and, hey, did Alabama lose? They did? Haha, okay. I'm a Big Ten guy. Okay, back in the back.
Yeah, I hope this is correct, but I don't know, so that's why I'm asking. I know of the shroud, but I've also heard that there was maybe a smaller shroud that only covered Jesus' face that potentially went along with this. Is that true?
I have no idea. I heard about 3 words in that whole question. All right, this is my interpretation site over here. Sorry?
He's asking about the Sudarian.
Yeah, the cloth. What about it? What about it?
Is the Sudarium of Oviedo a real artifact?
Oh, yeah.
The face cloth.
Okay, if that's what you're saying. Oh, I got you, the face cloth. There is a face cloth which may be the face cloth that was put on Jesus. Could be. It's its own argument. I don't like the argument. I don't think it's as clear, but it could be. But whatever it is, we get this idea, as I told you, face cloth means handkerchief. So I think, well, if you put the handkerchief over the face, that's going to have the image. No, for a couple of reasons. Both, as I said, Lazarus and Jesus is rolled up around the head, around the waist, around the head and around the face. And the other one is the Sudarian was believed to be the cloth. When they took the person down from the cross, nobody wants to look at a corpse that's like when you cut somebody's head off and you see the grotesque look that's on the news sometimes. They don't want to show you the face of the person who died because it's gross, so they put a face cloth over it. But it comes off at the tomb. It comes off at the tomb. So either way, here's some possibilities. Sudarian is not Jesus's. It is, in which case it was taken off so it's irrelevant. It was taken off before they were buried, etc. I do think there was a cloth tied here. You go, well, you already said they took it off before. Time out. In the Talmud, Jews are commanded to bind up the jaw because in rigor mortis, the jaw usually pops open. They were told to tie the jaw shut. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the Sudarian. So there's some possibilities. Okay, next.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure who's up front.
Sorry, what?
You asked about what happens to the body during the resurrection.
What implications?
It's my understanding that because there is no smearing of the blood didn't smear across the face, that whoever was in the shroud didn't remove it. They just stopped being in it.
Oh, you mean if they tore it off and they broke the scabs, it would start bleeding again? Well, that's true
it would start to smear, right?
Sure.
So the implication...
And dead bodies do bleed. Just remember the testimonies from the guys in the labs.
So the implication, I believe, is that whatever happened to the body in the shroud, whatever radiation was given off, after that point, that person was not removed from the shroud in a conventional fashion that would smear those blood stains. That person, as I understand it, possibly just stopped being in the shroud.
Are you saying they could have put him right in the tomb with that shroud on him?
No, I'm saying that during that explosion of radiation, that
the burst,
that
burst of radiation,
that the body in the shroud dematerialized.
That's a very common view.
Yeah.
That the body dematerialized because the New Testament seems to say something like that. And here's the example. When the stone is rolled away, Jesus didn't say thank you and walk out. He was already gone. So when the stone is rolled away, the body's gone. So wherever Jesus went through the rock, If he went through the rock, he certainly could have gone through cloth. Okay.
Okay, I have a question. To me,
Pardon?
this is more of a faith question than it is this the shroud of Jesus? Seems to me that God has said to us, you shall have no other gods. And he knows as people, we have a propensity to worship something.
Yeah, that's awful.
And the shroud has been worshiped for centuries.
It has been.
I don't understand how it could be the shroud of Jesus,
How God would allow it.
how God would allow that to happen.
It's very thoughtful, and we entertain that in both our books. But we argue that you can argue either way. You can say, God wouldn't leave this because it would be an image. He doesn't allow images, and he doesn't want it worshipped, so it wouldn't happen. Here's the other view. We could be nearing the time of the end, and this might be something that God allows as a last-minute encouragement to evangelism before the world is over. And we won't know which is which because we don't know God's mind. I do think that's a thoughtful objection. And whatever view you take of that, we know from Scripture nobody has any business worshiping the shroud. None. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes?
Unless I missed something in the discussion, all the carbon dating that you discussed has been thrown out.
Yeah, they don't know what date it is, but they know what date it isn't, the one they got.
So why isn't there a line a mile long of actual good people that want to carbon date it?
Yes.
And replace all that information?
Yes. Okay. Let me back up a step. A lot of Protestants don't like the cloth because they say it's a Catholic relic, and I'm not Catholic. First of all, slow down. You know, Catholics can be Christians, and a lot of Baptists, and your denomination, there's a lot of people in all our denominations who are not saved, and a lot we don't think are that are. Only God knows those things. But, and I know you're not saying that, but you're saying, let me make sure I got this right. And I heard your voice fine. But let me go back. I made that first point, which I didn't want you to think that's what I was saying. But what was the other one?
Why isn't there more people trying to carbon date it?
Oh, yes, there's been many offers. Number one, the church won't allow it. And here's why you say, well, see, it's that Catholic relic thing. Not true. When the shroud was tested in 1978, it was not a Catholic relic. It was given to the Catholic Church in the 80s, 1980s. It was not Catholic in 78. So that's another one. They've had a lot of offers. But here, I don't agree with this, but here's what the church says. Y'all come here and you do these stupid experiments, and you tell us later the experiments don't work. Then you want another piece of the shroud, and the experiments don't work. And then you want another one. You know, pretty soon we're not going to have a shroud. So their stance is, let's just have faith. Now, I don't take a view like, I don't think we should just have, the New Testament teaches evidences are great and should be taught, but they say, we have an artifact here and we don't want to take it apart piece by piece by piece. There could be many other reasons, but so far, you're right. A lot of groups oh, by the way, the shroud has been dated again and again by non-carbon-14 techniques. You've probably done all this stuff, and Italian universities in particular. They've done other kinds of dating on it that come from laser labs and physics areas. And the shroud has a couple times, not as close as we'd like, but the shroud a couple times has been plus or minus 200 years. First century AD, plus or minus 200 years. First or second century, plus or minus 500 years. It's not 1288, but there are other dates that don't involve carbon dating. So it's a whole bunch of answers here, but it's politics too. And the church goes, you're not going to mess with it anymore. You guys blow it. And every time we allow you to do something, you want it again a few years later to do it again. We're not going to keep giving it to you for all your tests. Because they think faith is enough, and a lot of people say, no, we want facts, and they go, we disagree. You're not going to have it. Thankfully, we own it, and you're not going to have it. But it wasn't the Catholics until the 1980s. Okay, was that it? Was that all four? Okay, I'll stay around here until Mike says we got to go and we got to get out of here. But, Pastor?
Yep. Let's give Gary Habermas a hand and thank him.
Thank you.
If you'd like to interact with him, you can do so. We're going to have just some little snacks and drinks here out in the foyer. We'll do that, but let's conclude with a prayer. How about that? Oh, hold on a second.
We should probably thank David for bringing this.
Oh, yeah, thank Dave. You can check out the replica, too. You can come up here and see it. Yeah, just don't hang on the poles, right? Yeah, but you can look at it afterwards, after we conclude with a prayer. You know, get some water and a little bit of snacks here in the foyer. Hang out, enjoy one another. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear God in heaven, thank you so much for allowing Gary to be here and for Dave bringing the replica. And thank you so much for this information that is so interesting and intriguing. In your son's name we do pray. Amen.